Welcome, everyone. Thanks for tuning in today. I'm Nicole Forbes with Dennis's 7Ds, and today we're talking about houseplant health, and especially winter houseplant health. It's always a time of year where we pay closer attention to our houseplants, and of course, with many of us still being cautious about going out or staying at home, we're really paying more and more attention to our houseplants, which is a good thing because even though in the winter there is less for us to do for the houseplants, it's still important that we can kind of check in on them on a regular basis to monitor their health, to rotate the plants for better balanced growth, and I'll kind of explain what I mean about that. But the sun and the location of the light is so low in the sky and so like unidirectional in the south that a lot of our plants tend to kind of grow towards or tend to lean or become unbalanced and favor the direction of the sunlight. So rotating them, is another good thing to do. The heaters that are blowing in my house, we just, had a heater running in here so that the tropical plants got a little bit warm. The heaters kick up dust, and of course, dust lands on the foliage and starts to slowly kind of decrease the efficiency and functionality of the leaves in their ability to, gather sunlight and photosynthesize. So dusting the leaves is just another great thing to do with your houseplants, and something that should be done on a fairly regular basis, depending again on the location of the plant, the size of the leaves, those kinds of things. And with all that regular kind of touch and maintenance, even though you may not be watering as frequently or fertilizing or whatever other things, you're going to have a better chance of monitoring and staying on top of any potential adverse developments. Let's say a possible pest, maybe that you're overwatering, catch a new leaf as it's unfurling. It's not always a bad thing that you'll be witnessing or being able to pay attention to as you develop a regular and consistent maintenance schedule and kind of routine with your plants. So for me, it's really part of my whole weekend self-care kind of meditation and time to just relax. Working with my houseplants and kind of going through my weekly routine is done at the same time as I've got maybe laundry in. I might be in my bathrobe all day long. They can come in. I might be in my bathrobe, and in fact, the robe tie on my fuzzy bathrobe is a beautiful soft cloth that is perfect for cleaning the leaves of plants. Just happen to say. So although that does get it dirty, I'm running laundry, so I can throw that little tie into the laundry and wash it as well. But whatever you have, soft and gentle, and however, again, you can be soft and gentle with yourself at the same time. I think that that's one of the beautiful things that we're all finding with, in addition, I guess, to the obvious that houseplants are beautiful. Indoor plants bring life into your home and space and create a kind of lush and vibrant atmosphere, but they're also doing beneficial things to us, as I mentioned, and just really can become a critical aspect of your whole well-being, and how you live at home. So here we are. It's late January. It was 27th today. It's officially 52 days until the first day of spring. Not that anyone's counting down or anything, but so 52 days till spring. We're on the downside of winter. We've, at least here in Portland, we've gone past our 5 o'clock sunset. Now we're having sun setting just a little after 5, which is fantastic and exciting. So the days are getting longer. And as I know all those things, as I've taken note of, and as you, I'm sure, have taken note of, walking out of your work or the gym or at, appointments that you do at certain times of day, and now you're like, it's light out now instead of dark. I don't have to put on my flashlight to get to the car. The plants in our lives, they knew it before us. They knew when the light finally, became just a little bit longer every day as winter has, slowly kind of flipped towards its steady climb towards spring. The plants know just the same when it gets, daylight gets shorter, when the sun becomes dimmer, and as the sun kind of changes its angle and shifts in the sky into its winter pattern, our plants know that too. So even though, again, we think, well, winter in the house, it's not winter in my house. The plants know that about winter because of the mostly changes in the daylight. Temperature is not as significant to them, and most of us, by the way, are keeping our houses at a pretty consistent temperature all the time. So it's not that they use that as any kind of gauge. Now, what else? If you're a gardener, if you're, wanting to tend to some things that are live or, have a connection to nature, of course, it's a beautiful sunny day and you get out there and take a walk. But at home, there's not a lot at the moment that we're doing. Bulbs are about to come up. It's too early in the year to start seeds. So you can, you can do your seed shopping, gather, ideas and information, plan your garden as far as seeds go, but probably not for another month will you be starting seeds. So, what else are you going to do in your garden, or what are you going to do at home, but really kind of just hang out and love on your houseplants and spruce, of course. You can love on your cats too. Now, as I mentioned, we've got a handout that's always attached to the video. So it's just directly under the description or title of this video as a link. If you have any problems getting it, just make a comment and we will be sure to attach the information directly to you. But here on kind of my table today, I have gathered together an assortment or a range of plants. Some that don't look so great over here, and others that are in really good shape but are good examples of plants that can use some regular maintenance for one reason or another. In addition, I've got a little bit of like a basic houseplant care kit. So our kind of basic kit includes a nice mister sprayer. This is a great one for a fine mist that creates kind of a constant stream. Of course, a watering can. You can have, a milk jug or a fancy watering can or whatever you use. Ideally, you just keep this watering can full. That way it has room temperature water in it, or it's been able to sit so that when you need to water a plant, you're not pulling cold water directly out of the faucet. And I've got some kind of just basic solution type sprays. So I've got insecticidal soap and I have a neem oil. Both of these are just ready to spray, but you could have a concentrate bottle at home that you might be mixing up yourself. A soft rag that I'll be using to dust and clean the leaves because I'm not in my bathrobe, so I don't have my favorite little tie dusty. A tiny magnifying lens. This comes out of my pocket. Again, I just keep it handy so that I can kind of closely inspect spots or bumps or potential bugs on plants or whatever. Plus, things look cool up close. And then I've got just an easy, kind of lightweight, very fine point pair of snips that are just perfect for getting in and trimming houseplants without having like a great big pair of pruners or whatever like I normally use. So that is, and a very trusty and, high-tech chopstick that, you can reuse a wooden chopstick for a long, long time. So this is a reusable and has been reused chopstick. And then we'll talk about kind of doing some top dressings. So I have a few top dressings that I'm going to help a couple of plants out with, some worm castings, and then just a little bit of fresh potting soil. So that's sort of my basic kit. That's my care kit. And talking about light, as I was kind of referencing, you may notice that some plants start to really go downhill in the winter months because the space that they lived in the spring and summer had better access to the sunlight than what changes occur as the sun changes angles, and now they're left in sort of a darker space. So frequently we need to adjust our plants in dark spaces or move plants closer to windows just to get them a little bit better light. It's usually the south windows, but of course south, east, and west isn't bad either, but that south window is where the sun, has really gone. So in my home, I have a lot of north-facing windows. So I also employ several grow lights in just different places throughout the home so that I can have a wider variety of plants that thrive and grow well in spaces where they wouldn't really receive enough natural light. So I supplement the lighting in my home. If you notice on certain plants, and I have lots of great examples here, plants will pretty quickly orient towards the dominant light direction. So here, just kind of looking at, and it ends up just being the way that they face then. So here's my adorable little Calathea orbifolia, and you see when I turn it around, it's really got its backside to us right now. When I turn it back in this direction, its leaves are certainly optimizing light all in one direction. So giving this plant a subtle rotation once a week, every 2 weeks, will help to balance out the growth on it. It does have, we'll talk about this in more detail because it's got some raggedy leaves, but it is also making new growth. So nature is teaching us all the time, and one of the things it's teaching us is nothing lasts forever. Pony boy, right? So new things come as you trim off old things, and so again, it's just it's a lesson in balance at the same time. And speaking of balance, so the Calathea shows us a plant that has gone kind of one-sided, but look at this Monstera. Talk about the backside. So this Monstera's leaves are all facing the wall right now. They are all really facing the same direction. So if I dramatically turn it around, now all of the leaves are facing out and almost like tilted at the same angle, optimized to receive the maximum amount of light that they can possibly get. Now we've got some low leaves down here and some even smaller leaves down here. They're like runts. They are runts of the litter. They are not likely, when this plant grows a new leaf, the new leaf is going to come out and end up being as large as these. These little runt leaves are not likely to grow larger. They're just doing what they can down here. But we see that there's some yellow discoloration. Does that show up in the camera? So some yellow discoloration on this lower leaf. Because come on, what can it do down there? It's like, it's under a giant canopy of big, healthy Monstera foliage. So it just can't contribute to the overall plant health like these big leaves up top. Same will ultimately probably happen with these little guys. They'll slowly turn yellow and then we'll clip them off. Now, as they don't do it right away, like let that yellowing kind of fade, because while the leaf is here, its remaining gift to the plant is that there's nutrient reallocation that occurs. So right now, again, as we talk, and you'll see in your handout, we're not fertilizing this time of year. Plants are kind of using up the nutrients that they have stored in their root system. Look at this big fancy root system on Monstera here. So we don't need to fertilize, but we don't need to put it on a diet either. So we don't want to starve it or steal any of its food manufacturing resources, especially until this leaf has changed colors and really given back as much as it can to the plant itself, to the remaining plant. So again, turning, we've sort of, we haven't exactly lost the battle on keeping this plant growing balanced, but it's definitely going to benefit from a slow rotation too high. Definitely going to benefit from a slow rotation at this point before it just completely shifts to one side. Now, monsteras are also a vining type of plant, which means that ultimately to give this plant the support that it needs, we're going to need to give it a moss pole or a structure to climb up, or at the bare minimum to lean on. So this is probably not going to be significant or sufficient for this size monstera, but fortunately, I put this baby down. Fortunately, these moss poles are stackable, and we also carry larger ones to begin with, but something that can go in with a fibrous, the plastic sheeting comes off, of course. There's a fibrous covering to these poles, which allows, in many instances, a plant to just root directly in and climb these for support. And once plants start climbing, often the leaves get even larger and more dramatic. Are you going to knock everything down too? The leaves get larger and even more dramatic. So not only do you help the plant then kind of regain symmetry, you give it support, you help it to get taller because they don't have like wood necessarily to support themselves. They're used to climbing up trees in the jungle or whatever. So, and then of course, as I mentioned, the leaves get larger too. So rotating is important and it's hard. I mean, if the plant looks good in one direction, you don't exactly want to turn it away from you. But it is amazing how quickly, turned away, these leaves will reorient themselves to still take advantage of the best sunlight they can. So it's just a couple of days that they kind of look away from you, and then they'll readjust to their new orientation, and their leaves will as well. So have patience and trust me on that one. Now, again, back to trust, watering on houseplants. We are going to do a class in, I don't know, a few weeks, watch for it, that is called Don't Kill Them with Kindness. And it's all about how to kind of best water indoor plants. So we're going to go really into good detail on pebble trays, bottom watering, regular watering, watering with fertilizer, how to tell when they need water, all of that. So, if you stay tuned and, don't kill your plants with kindness until then, it's really best to let plants go on the drier side. Allow them to get at least, in most, not your maidenhair fern, she likes to stay moist. And calatheas, for example, let them get maybe halfway down dry before, and halfway down the pot dry. You can stick your finger in, but what we do is we really suggest keeping plants in their plastic, lightweight growers pots, and that helps to then use the weight of the overall plant to gauge how much moisture is in the soil, how much water, because the top may look dry after a week. The top looks dry and crusty, and I think, oh my, I better water it. But if I lift it up, I may feel that there's still some weight in the soil, which indicates that there's moisture down low. And if we water, of course, whether it's to the top or through the bottom, ultimately water is going to end up at the bottom end of the container that was already still moist. So we end up overwatering the plant, even though the top looks dry. Now, there is nothing wrong with checking the soil, checking the roots. Now, this plant is well rooted, and the dirt's not all going to fall apart. So it depends, again, on how recently your plants have been potted. But I'm going to just turn this plant upside down, take it out of the pot, and see what the roots look like. Because I can see from the holes in the bottom that the soil looks pretty dry. And so I'm guessing by the weight of the plant, the appearance of the soil on top, and the dry on the bottom, that the whole thing is on the dry side and it's ready for a drink of water. So I'm going to kind of push on the bottom. A little bit falls out. It's not a mess, but we see that I've got a pretty dry root ball. And for a calathea, that's part of the problem of why I know, I'm just dirt everywhere. For a calathea, that's part of the problem of why we see some of these kind of brown, slightly crispy edges. Further down on the plant, there's a pretty good one, such a pretty leaf, and then you've got this little brown crispy edge. So getting a little bit more consistent with watering on this plant will help to reduce that crispy brown edge. It's also a calathea, so it likes some humidity. So grouping plants together, like if all of these guys sat together in a space, they're going to breathe amongst one another and increase the moisture in the air around the grouping of plants. So raising the general humidity in this space. You can use a mister to raise humidity, but man, you got to do it frequently and consistently. So for just misting to compensate for dry air, you're going to mist like twice a day, every day for the rest of your life or the rest of your plant's life. That's kind of a lot. So pebble trays, again, check our website. We describe what pebble trays are all the time, but pebble trays can help, especially with smaller groups of plants that can live together. You can cover needy plants occasionally with domes or cloches, or some people are now using these beautiful IKEA display cases. If you come into our garden centers, you'll actually see them. Glass on the outside, you can put, there's like, you know, those IKEA hacks. There's a way to put grow lights into them. And once you close that up, it's like a little greenhouse in there. So closing it up, plants are off gassing. They end up raising the humidity inside that little case as well. So that can be just a cool way to show off your plants, maybe your extra special plants. And it's usually the extra special ones that need all of the extra special humidity and stuff too. So, before I put this calathea down though, come take a close-up look at the under foliage. Get closer, Becky. I know it looks so, I mean, I wouldn't cry if this were my plant. I've got some damaged leaves. Yes, we're learning how to care for each other. But if we look beyond the damaged leaves, let's see if I can show you this amazing rolled up new leaf right here. And another one right here. These are brand new fresh leaves. Another chance at redemption. We're going to figure out how to water it better. We're going to raise the humidity on this plant slowly as the new leaves, I think there's 3. Are there 3? There's another new leaf coming up down here. I mean, get excited about this stuff, right? You know, put it on Instagram, call your best friend, tell them how excited you are. Your best friend ought to understand, or you should reevaluate your friends. Another new one coming up down here. So over time, I'm going to snip off some of these most damaged leaves, but I'm going to wait until at least the new ones have come up and unfurled. And then again, I can kind of assume that I'm maybe making a trade-off, new leaves for old leaves, rather than robbing it of all of them. So one of the lessons, see, I have to turn it right now so it at least faces you. There's going to be some small level of imperfection. There's just going to be. Just like, I know you're beautiful as all get out, but you've got a little spot on your skin somewhere. We all have that tiny bit of imperfection because we're living creatures, and that goes for our plants as well. So they can teach us also to just allow just a little blemish here and there and find the beauty in that. Or the wabi-sabi, you know, that's the week I went on vacation. Boy, that Seattle trip was fun, but you didn't get the water that you needed. And we, you know, come around. So let's see, I got off topic there, but watering. Oh, speaking of, I just let one of my plants, not exactly this philodendron, but a very similar plant with a very similar shaped leaf in my collection at home, rolled its little leaves, not upwards, but downwards. Hard for me to almost do it, but rolled its little leaves downward like this. And as I looked at it, rather than sometimes they're cupped like so, it was the opposite. They were making these little tacos, little leaf tacos. And it was up high because a lot of the hanging plants like these are up high. It's hotter up in the upper portion of my higher ceilings because, again, the heat that rises. And I had just been lazy and not watered this plant soon enough to only look over. And this is why, again, being consistent, you can catch this stuff. It happened to be, Monday watering day. And I look over and I'm like, oh, I must have skipped you last time, didn't check midweek or whatever. And now you're in taco stage. So nothing to panic. It's not like you can't come back from that. So I, of course, took the plant. Now the soil is way too dry for me to just water it. If you water it at that stage, a lot of times, so it's just going to run through and not get the plant heavier and not be absorbed by the soil. So that really dry stage requires bottom watering. And the bottom watering technique is super easy, but it takes a lot longer. So I have several trays, some like dish tubs and low trays that I just set out, put an inch or inch and a half of water in those trays, and then set my plants inside the trays in their plastic pots, sitting right into the water, so that that inch or so of water covers the bottom of the pots. And we leave them there sometimes for 15 minutes, sometimes for an hour or more, depending on the container size, depending on the plant. But every so often, I'm going to go over to that basin and pick up the plant to see if it's gaining weight. Once it's reached that fully watered weight, and we get to know that by getting to know our plants. Once it's reached that fully watered weight, then I allow it to drip dry. And then it goes back into the decorative container that it lives in. Whether or not that container has a drain hole or not, I choose to not pot directly in them so that not only the plants are more transportable, but I can use this weighing technique to really gauge the water and not have to stick my finger in, use a meter, or rely on any other resources. You don't want plants to sit in water for, days or overnight. And you're certainly going to get used to which plants are more tolerant of that and need that longer soak of bottom watering. Again, just based off of how heavy or how wet the soil gets. Now, that's a thorough watering. When you do a bottom soaking like that, it's a thorough watering, which then allows your plants to go a significant stretch between losing weight again and needing that watering again. So if you're used to just kind of, a top off every so often, that constant sip is not giving the plants enough to drink. Although it seems like you're watering all the time, you're not sufficiently wetting the soil to give them that drink. So more frequent but shallow watering can end up keeping the plant too wet because of that bottom level staying moist when the top level appears dry. Grouping plants together. Okay, we talk about that. Fertilizing, at this time of year, as I mentioned, plants are not quite yet. Yes, Calathea is growing new leaves. We have new leaves all over the place. And that's really great and exciting, but that doesn't indicate that the plants are in need of nutrient. They have, just like any creature, they know to store things for the future. So they're using some stored up resources right now. And often winter fertilizing, when plants are in a slow growth mode or when they're already in a nutrient balance, over fertilizing or fertilizing in the winter can cause leaf discoloration or the browning of tips, just like we see in some other instances where we can diagnose, in this case, as a moisture issue. Now, you can use some light, like very slow release organic light fertilizer, something like Joyful Dirt we do mention, or a compost tea, or I love worm castings, worm tea as a top dressing. So they don't really recognize or register as fertilizers. They're just soil amendments and can help refresh your soil and buy you some time. And I say buy you some time because even though we may think, gosh, this plant really needs to be repotted right now, that's probably not the case. If it's staying alive, even if it means it's a pain in the rear because you've got to water it more frequently, or it falls over, or it looks funny, temporarily put it in a bigger decorative pot so that it looks proportionally right. Put it under a pebble tray so that you can have better control over the watering, and do what you can to string it along for another 6 weeks or so. And once we're into more active growth in the spring, repotting is a much more successful endeavor. And to plug another class, check for to repot or not, and Houseplant Spa Day, which will be coming up in early March, probably the first week of March, where we'll finally say, green light, it's time to repot your plants if they need it. And here's how to tell. So they don't always need it, they don't always want it, and by all means in the wintertime, we try to avoid it. It is, so to refresh, let's get some of these guys out of my way. To refresh soil, which needs to be done all the time, older, kind of forgotten plants that don't need much attention and you're just sort of humming along with them, all of a sudden you look over and you're like, oh, that soil looks kind of crusty. Or as you try to feel it to see how moist it is, the soil may just feel hard and kind of compact at the top. Now, you can break up the soil, simple, just kind of scratch it up lightly with, again, either my trusty chopstick or a plastic fork. This allows very light action so that you can be cautious of any surface roots or anything like that. So just kind of breaking or uncrusting it and tamping it back down, that's one way. But aerating the soil, see what would be a good thing to aerate here. Aerating the soil is another way to help out. Okay, so here's look, I'm just coming over to this plant for the first time. I grabbed it in the shop, I brought it over here, now we're gonna take a look at it for its inspection. It's weekly or bi-weekly, whatever. I got a low leaf down here. It looks, you wouldn't always look at it and be like, what's your story? What happened to you? Why? What happened? It looks like it got pinched. Again, remember, it's way down here. Way down too low. Probably couldn't have really helped a lot anyways. So it tried and it died. And now we can get rid of that. Any other leaves? This is a ficus. Sometimes ficus do a little bit of a random leaf drop, so we can take that into account. It's good to know your plant. Know some of its personalities, and they totally have personalities. So ficus are dramatic. The rubber tree here is less dramatic than some other ficus. Won't mention names, but but again, we can groom it. So I take some debris out of the pot. I see some leaves that aren't so great. I don't panic about that. Look at this plant. It looks fantastic. New growth? Check. Happy? Absolutely. Leaves are dirty? Yeah, leaves are dirty. It's been, I don't know where it's been, but it's got stuff all over it. So we're going to clean the leaves. But we're also, it's not necessarily in need of it, but we're going to aerate the soil because I want to show you how it's done. So she's got legs here to show kind of easily the base of the plant. Soil's not terribly crusty. In fact, on this, it's really like a fibrous kind of stringy soil in there, probably a lot of peat. Depending on how deep your pot is, you only want to push the chopstick down halfway. So this is almost as deep as my chopstick is. Here's the depth of the pot. So I'm going to just push it down about there, take it out and twist a little if that, helps you not pull soil out. Another, and I'm careful to not run right into a hard root. So if I hit something that's really like, no, then I'm going to back it out and find another little spot and push it in. So don't go pushing through roots or being really aggressive. We're meant to help the plant in this case. We don't want to like send it into shock and stab it. So another, on a pot this size, we got a nice 8-inch. I can do, 4 or 6 holes. Spread them around a little bit. So here, just push it in. And what that does is create some more air that can enter into the root system, as well as in hard, crusty soil. Often when you water, the water just like runs over top of the hard, crusty soil and then down the sides of the pot and out the holes and like skips the whole situation. So once you've just pushed the holes in, now the water can actually penetrate into the center of the root ball and slowly make its way down into the soil to help be absorbed before it runs all the way out. So in addition to aeration, we can top dress. And now, if it was like really crusty, gross soil on top, first thing I would do is take a bunch of that off. Use a fork, and the fork will just like grab crusty bits of soil. If the roots aren't holding on to it, plant's not going to need it, and as long as you replace it, right? So we don't want to go too. We don't want to put more soil back than we remove, but we also don't want to remove more soil than we put back. I hope that okay. So in this case, we don't really have to take anything away, but I want to give it like a very fine top dressing. And I'm going to give it some worm castings because they're awesome. And this is worm poop, genuine worm poop. It is odor-free, absolutely beautiful, very fine, almost a sandy texture. We're having so much fun, you guys. I wish you were here. One of these days we'll go back to live classes. But this is what I'm doing at home on Mondays. If you're ever having a crummy Monday, just think of me scattering worm poop around on my houseplants and, in my bathrobe. It's a great life. I mean, why doesn't everybody do this? I don't know. So little spoonfuls of worm castings. That's the more common and proper name for them. And then I'm talking like a light layer. So a tiny light layer of worm castings over top, just a dusting. That's powerful stuff. We're going to do it all over the plant. And then it is important that on top of the worm castings, we give a tiny covering of regular potting soil. So worm castings alone, they also kind of stop the water from going through them because they're like magical worm poop. But if you put the potting soil on top of the worm castings and make kind of a worm casting sandwich there, then water absorbs into the potting soil and slowly pushes its way through. So don't say I didn't warn you. If you just crush the top layer with worm castings or coffee grounds or other weird stuff and not put that final top layer of soil on, you're going to find that the amendments have become hydrophobic, which means they're afraid of water. And so water goes rolling off of them and you have a situation. So that's top dressing, worm castings, potting soil. And now it's like treatment time, let's say. So this is, where you just really look closely at your plants. If someone saw me through the window, for example, they might think that I lost something inside of my potted plant, the way that I'm just critically inspecting it, turning it around and thoroughly looking at it. Sometimes I will even employ the flashlight on my cell phone, and on my larger plants in darker spaces, I have been known to use my camping headlamp. Those headlamps are awesome. You have light right where you're looking, and your hands are free, so that allows me then to, work with the plants. But when I'm just doing a quickie lookup, flashlight on the phone, I'm going to look closely at the plant, and handy, it's so handy, it's usually in my little sweater pocket, but handy and at the ready is my tiny hand lens, or you could have like big Sherlock Holmes lens or your makeup magnifying glass, whatever it is that you are going to be able to take a closer up look at whatever you might see. My husband, whose eyes are not as good as they used to be, is also brilliant in that he will often take pictures of things in real scale and then look at the picture on his phone and kind of blow that up so that he sees things in better detail. However you do it, you're going to be able you're going to need to be able to take a close-up. Now we know, again, as we're looking at this Ficus elastica ruby, that it's supposed to have the burgundy colored leaves. It is supposed to have the little modeling or kind of variegation of pink that we see along the edges. And so that's, again, knowing your plant. Otherwise, you would be like, well, why does it have all of this striping and weird discoloration? It is because that's the way that ruby grows. And ruby and all rubber trees have these large leaves that have this shiny surface, waxy, shiny surface, which just really shows dust. And so, I mean, you don't even always have to get your little cloth wet or anything. I don't exactly get my bathrobe tie wet. I just use it because it's soft and small and convenient and always around my waist and if I'm in my bathrobe. So I've got my cloth here and I just want to dust it. So if you look kind of closely, you can see the buildup layer of dust on the leaf surface, and with just a dry, clean cloth, we want to just wipe it clean. Now, going all around the plant, doing the same thing, when we're just dusting them, it's usually only on the surface, only on the tops of the leaves, right? Because dust, fortunately, thank goodness dust doesn't fly. Sometimes it seems like it does in my house, but it doesn't go into the undersides of the leaves, so we can just focus on that top layer. New leaf doesn't really have any dust. It hasn't been around yet long enough. Oh yeah, a little turn. We just turn it around, checking everything, and sometimes I've got good music playing and I can just get carried away. So let me make sure you've done all the leaves. Now on this plant, now that I've done that, I think, well, I thought that spot was dust, but I'm not sure now. Let's take a closer look. This is why we have our little hand lens or brighter light, and I'm going to look down there and go, oh yeah, no, that's just a little blemish, nothing to panic about. What's that little spot? Oh, it's just the latex that comes out of a rubber tree, which tends to be white, and sometimes they leave little white drips around. So funny spots, anything that's possibly of concern, we would want to take a closer look at. And should we identify that maybe there's spider mites on, we're just starting to see signs of spider mites on the foliage, then the next thing we're going to do is go into treatment mode, which in my little care kit is going to include neem oil or insecticidal soap. I go for neem oil usually when it comes to mites, but it also depends on the plant. If it's a serious case of mites and the plant is in close proximity to a lot of my other plants, I am also going to isolate it. Now, we all have a real good handle on quarantining and isolating at this point, and it's not as bad as it sounds, but it's really important for the health of the, community, right? The collective. So we want to take this plant away from other plants. That makes it also easier to treat because you may not want to just stand right in your dining room and spray do the treatment for the foliage. And even one step better, if I'm using oil, I will often put this plant either inside kind of a plastic sheeting or a box with plastic sheeting or a garbage bag so that I can spray and treat it and allow it to drip and not get it all over my floors or my carpet and that kind of thing. Sometimes even with really bad cases, I'll spray the plant in the garbage bag and then seal it up at the top because maybe I don't like the smell of neem oil. And I also think that like that's just like sealing in all of the spray and making it work better. Or, I don't know. Don't do it forever. You know, you want to let the plant out after a couple of hours. But seems like, again, a nice way to keep things clean as well as be very effective. You can just use neem oil as a wipe, as just a gentle cleanup on the leaves. And as I mentioned in the handout, way down towards the bottom in monitoring and troubleshooting section, as you get to know your plants, you get to know that there are like regular pest associations that go with certain plants. As I mentioned, a rubber tree is probably going to get spider mites. It might get scale as well. Spider mites also tend to like cast iron plants, but you usually won't have spider mites on a monstera unless they spread there from another plant. So they usually don't originate there. It's just the same as when we talk about certain plants are relatively pest-free or pest or disease-free. It's that they have very few pest associations. So once you know, like I don't call them problem plants, but I did call them problem plants. So once you know those plants, then you can work on a preventative, kind of precautionary basis with a maintenance spray, wipe down, whatever you want to call it, of neem oil on like a monthly basis. So our cast iron plant, this is a variegated one as well. So absolutely gorgeous little stripes on the leaves. We want to keep the leaves clean. And on this case, I want to use my neem oil wipe on both the top and the bottom sides of the leaves. So this at home, I tend to use socks because socks are great. You can just put one on each hand and then kind of up each leaf. You get a little neem on each and just, again, it's lots of fun. Anything grassy or blade-like, the sock wipe is perfect. And I can't sell you anything better. So neem oil on a soft cloth, very non-scientific. I mean, like I said, you can spray too. But when we're just wiping, sometimes I'm not even like moving the plant or anything. But I'm going to just thoroughly wipe. You can kind of support it, so you can get a nice wipe. And then I'm going to do the same on the back side. I don't like the way neem oil smells, but that's the way it goes. And then you're going to just work around on all the foliage, doing the same thing thoroughly. I'm just showing off. So that is, again, the monthly maintenance on our problem plants and how important it is to then just, that neem will get rid of any potential small community of spider mites rather than allowing a small community to propagate in your home till suddenly you're like, oh my gosh, I have spider mites. And then a big community of spider mites can be a lot more difficult to work on controlling. Now, funny example that I have over here is this Dracaena lemon lime. This Dracaena lemon lime has seen better days, but its days aren't over. It still has potential, and there are ways that we can address what's going on with it and correct it going into the future. So this had 3 tops or 3 pieces of growing. One of them has lost its top completely. The other 2 have decent looking new growth coming out of the top, so we're doing quite well there. But Dracaena do a couple of funny things as they grow. First of all, over time, they lose leaves off of these bottom stems, and that's what creates that line pattern on the stalks themselves and gives them that kind of palm tree-y or, tree-y type look. So these on this side haven't lost all of their leaves yet, but they're starting to. So see here, just turned brown. I don't cut them off. I always pull these leaves off. You can kind of tell right how they come off. So we just know if you've been with me all the hour, again, they were low leaves. There's a few of them that are coming off. They're brown and crispy at this point. We've got new growth. And on a Dracaena, we identify that this is part of their typical growth pattern, shedding the bottom leaves. So are we going to panic that we took 3 ooky leaves off of the bottom? No. We're not going to look for the source or the, bug that's doing it, or really shame ourselves into watering more or less or repotting or moving the plant. This is nature. This should happen. However, there are other portions of this plant that show some different care imbalances, we'll say. I think that's a good one. I'm going to try to remember that term. So some different imbalances in its watering and care. And this, although it's in a big pot and the top of the soil looks really, really dry and crumbly, and even like I could pour a part of it out, it's heavy, and I think it's still fairly wet. And I can see it's wet on the bottom. I can see wet through the holes, and it's just heavy in general. So I know that there's moisture in the soil. I'm going to pull off this leaf here. So again, you see how on a Dracaena, and I know, although if you're following along closely in the botanical world, nomenclature wise, Dracaena have been reclassified as Sansevieria. I know that, but it's driving me crazy, and for 30 years I've called it a Dracaena, so I'm having a hard time with that. But the way that they grow and the way that they shed their leaves is that those leaves were like hugging the central stem. So if my pinky were the stem, the leaf just cups right around it. And so by pulling it off like so, you can take the entire leaf off, including the place that it wraps around the stem. If you don't get that all, that's when we end up with these little brown nubbins that dry up, and over time you can actually finish the job and take them off. That makes the stem look a little bit cleaner. You don't have brown stuff. But I took this leaf off because we can see dark spots, some dark discoloration on the leaf edge here, and more dark spots here. Now these are not normal spots. This is most likely too dry of air, and then the plant got just saturated with water, and probably again is in too big of a pot, could have been in too low of light, so it just had a watering imbalance. It's okay. Again, we're recovering. So taking these leaves off, it's likely that it can even regrow some leaves in its spot in where an old leaf came off. In fact, there's like a little growth spurt, kind of looks like a little nubbin or belly button that sits right there at the line where the leaf came off, that can grow a new leaf. Or in the case of this stalk that lost its top, it can actually grow a whole new kind of top itself off of one of the little growth nubbins or nodes, basically, that it has along the stem. So I mention again all of that because somewhere on this plant, here it is. So all of us, one time or another, well, and I'll finish that differently than I was going to start it. All of us that have grown plants, that can grow plants, that have plants and love plants, have also killed plants. And I think that that's really important to acknowledge and to realize. This is practice, and we're learning. If you try anything, in most cases, you're going to fail some of the way before you get better or good at it. So learning to grow plants in these instances as things happen to them, trying to pay attention to what happened, learning absolutely as much as you can from your mistakes, and then working to remedy that. If I kill a plant, chances are good that I will buy that same plant again to just give it another chance. And so that's, I think, an important lesson to try and try again. And that goes with everything in life. But with these leaves here that I just pulled off, so remember, this is how the tip is supposed to look, right? I mean, minus the blotches, this leaf comes to a kind of natural and elegant point. But occasionally, the end of it, as we looked at with calathea, the end gets brown or crispy or discolored. And some people will just try to snip off the brown. Well, I'll just keep this leaf and I'll try to artfully, nobody will notice. Oh, maybe I'll trim, oh, see, it's a slippery slope, first of all. Maybe I'll trim it up this way. Oh, I'll make that look a little bit more natural, and that's another. Okay, nobody's going to notice that. It's still a nice, it's might look good for a day. Might buy you time with company. But over time, cutting a portion of a damaged leaf almost always leads to further damage or further dieback. So both of these leaves had been trimmed. I don't know if you can tell or see in the camera, but they've had a cut. Instead of coming to a point like this, they've been cut to kind of give the effect of having a point. But had I not removed them from the plant, they would still be browning at the very tip. And I don't, again, know if it comes through very well in the camera, but at the cut end where the scissors or pruners went across, all of those cells are slowly dying back as well. So that's kind of the plant's way of just sealing off like a wound, you know. So it's got a scab over, and we'll see that discoloration anyways. So don't try to cut off your blemishes. Just remove the entire leaf once it has completely kind of, transitioned. And as I mentioned, done that nutrient recycling as well. So let it yellow, take it off. And as you're doing your regular maintenance, clean it up a little. You can take off old leaves. Usually I have a little basket kind of where I water and take care of my plants that I can just discard little bits of debris as I have it. But so then the final on this Dracaena, it's dusty and it might have a few insects. So we'd go ahead and put some neem on a soft cloth. And this, because there's a lot of leaves here, oh, it really is dusty. This guy needs like a good, solid cleanup. And so this is a perfect instance where I'm gonna like put my earbuds in and call my mom, or call a friend. Because you can just kind of then just focus in on what you're doing. Your attention span doesn't need to be like so focus, but you can be thorough while you're catching up with a good friend or your mom or, whatever. Listen to an audiobook or good music. All of that is, again, kind of helping you take the time that you need to make this plant look as good as it possibly can. And in the end, you feel better. The person you called that reached out to feels better. Your plant feels better. And honestly, isn't that what it's all about? So I hope that this has been an enlightening topic, and if you do have detailed questions, please put them into the comment section. I will answer them directly after the class today. And do know that, of course, Dennis 7Ds offers solutions here at the garden centers. We can do our best to diagnose your plant either through good photos, samples, leaves that you bring in a sealed bag for us, please, or through email correspondence. And you can always contact us through our website. And we do also offer a virtual houseplant consultation program where you can FaceTime or Skype us right into your home, and we can do our best to, give a checkup to all of your little home jungle as well. So that being said, as always, thanks for watching and happy gardening.